include here. So I'll go ahead and get started with the Ethics Act statement. It is the duty of subcommittee members to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflicts of interest in performing the duties as a member of the D&I subcommittee of the Issues Committee of the State Bar. Any member of the subcommittee who is aware of any personal conflicts or appearances thereof with respect to the matters before the subcommittee should disclose those now or during the course of the meeting. All right. Do we have, we don't have any new attendees, right? Everyone knows everybody, right? No one's new to the call, as I can see, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? The first order of business will be thanking you once again for taking the time out on this Monday to spend an hour with us to try to hopefully wrap up our work today in terms of recommendations that we will make to the Issues Committee in due course. And so again, I want to first off say that at least and I believe Leonore agrees that our conversation was much more robust in July, and we believe that might have had something to do with the fact that we were sitting across the table from one another, which I commend you on, but I want to make sure that we are equally robust today to the extent we can. I understand it's a bit more challenging on Zoom, but I do want folks to really be candid and give us their wise guidance and counsel on how we proceed today in the performance of our duties. So with that, I'll move to the first item, which is the approval of the minutes from the July 14th session in Asheville. You should have received those already from Leonore. I entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I move that we approve those minutes from July.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussions or changes thereto? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? And I'm going to try to do this by voice rather than the official raising your hand and counting the tally. I think we can get our business done without recording the votes, so long as I can ascertain that there's a clear majority based on my hearing that's not going yet. All right. We shall now proceed to return to our recommendations. We made good progress in Asheville, I thought, and we are down to, according to my notes, the bullet on the second page, which deals with potential collection of demographic information. We had started a discussion about that and obviously had to conclude our meeting because of the hour. And so I wanted to start again with that particular bullet point, which is on page 2 of the materials you should have received. And the bullet is to add questions regarding demographic information, i.e. race and gender, to members' annual registration forms, which include appropriate opt-out provisions. We'd made some good discussions and good comments and remarks there. My notes indicate that we concluded with Alice maybe going to ask the staff to investigate what might be done to collect this information and keep it anonymous based on some of the discussions that we had. So Alice, I don't know if you're able to give us an update just yet or whether we need to.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Right ahead.
Yeah, I was hoping that Peter would be on the call, but I don't see him on the call. And Peter and I have discussed this, and we think with our new database that will be in place this fall, that we should be able to do that fairly readily. We are going to a system where folks are going to file their annual report to the State Bar and dues online. We're trying to actually push people to paying their dues online.
Right.
And so that will make it very easy for us to include a tab on there that would ask people to provide the information. And Peter assures me that we can do it in an anonymous way. I think Peter and I both have concluded that this is probably a good thing to do at this stage. I think the committee needs to think about what demographic information you're going to collect. I know this previously when we did it on a voluntary basis, that the descriptions of different ethnic groups or racial groups can be pretty sensitive. And so you need to really think that through and might look at the categories that we set up when we were doing the voluntary. And when I say voluntary, we really just we sent out a one-time email to all members of the State Bar and asked them to voluntarily respond, identifying themselves, and it was all anonymous. So that's one thing I think you need to think about before doing that. But the short answer is technologically, we can definitely do that.
Okay, terrific. Okay. And as posited, I guess the demographic information sort of, as I see it on the recommendation list here, dealt with sort of race and gender, but we can deal with that going forward, so long as we can technologically collect that. But as we did before, I want to make sure that I throw all of these topics open for full discussion among the subcommittee members and other guests as well. And so having gotten the report from Alice, and I think the discussion that we had in July suggested that there was not a huge opposition, if any, to proceeding as we are discussing here today. I want to throw it open to the subcommittee for further comments on that bullet point.
I just wanted to ask a question. Good afternoon, everybody. When we were talking about this before, did we consider the other demographic information that we have included in the proposed statement? So those other things, I know those can be much more sensitive for folks to share and talk about, but the, national origin, sex, religion, age, disability, all of those different things. And I'm not suggesting one way or the other. I just wanted to try to keep it consistent with the diversity statement that we proposed.
I guess my recollection is there was some discussion about making sure that we were consistent in our writings and in our documents. And as you know, because the statement that this subcommittee approved list several unique characteristics of diversity, and as you all have those because you have those materials. So it certainly exceeded just race and gender. It has a host of categories here that we may or may not want to try to include on an anonymous survey, but I think at a minimum we talked about maybe focusing on race and gender, but I'm here to facilitate. So what are the thoughts of the others on this particular point that Dorothy has raised?
So I would actually just start off by saying that since it is going to be an anonymous question, if we're asking for this information anonymously, then I think that we should throw it out there. As much of these other categories as we feel comfortable putting in. I would say all of them, since we have them in the diversity statement. And if one of the goals is going to be to make sure that we are diverse across the board, then we want to be able to say that we do have all of those groups being represented. And so if it's anonymous, it's voluntary. They don't have to complete every question. That, some people are going to do all of them, and some people are going to pick which ones they feel comfortable with. So I would say go ahead and put them all in, and then just let people choose which ones they choose to disclose.
your suggestion is that we recommend that the bar, if we go down this road, collect demographic data that includes the characteristics that are set forth in our DEI statement that we approved for recommendation last meeting, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Others?
This is Gina. I'm wondering out loud if we run the risk in doing what Dorothy is suggesting, that people, because it seems like everybody wants to be offended these days about everything. So do we run the risk that people will be offended that we asked about their religious and sexual practices or affiliations and religion, and then refuse to answer the basics? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I would like it, I'm the one that I want this information. I think it's necessary. I'm just wondering how we go about getting it without offending all the people who want to be offended.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
I would say that the way we're not going to get there 100%. That's first of all. I think the best approach for us in this is to make sure that we do a mass marketing campaign. And every time we advertise this information, that we make sure people know that it is anonymous and it's voluntary, and that they don't have to complete it, and that it's completely anonymous, and that we won't use the information for any reason other than to try to keep, make sure that we're keeping up with the demographics and refer back to this diversity statement and plan if we end up having one moving forward, so that folks know why we're asking for that information. Because I understand that there are lots of people that want to be offended, but I think it's more people that want to be included. And so I would venture into being more encompassing so that we can, make sure we fulfill that goal, as opposed to being so overly concerned with offending people.
Todd, Alice has her hand up.
Alice, absolutely.
So I just want to sort of follow up on Gina's comments, because I know when we did this voluntary survey, and this has got to be 10 years ago, the descriptions of ethnic identity and racial identity, we got feedback, and people are very sensitive on these issues. So I do think there's a potential that we could turn people off and then not get as much participation as we want. I also would suggest, though, that the decision about what to be included be based on what we need the information for. So like, why do we need to know whether somebody is Catholic or Jewish or whatever? I mean, is that information that is important and useful to us to understanding who our bar membership is or not? I think religion in particular, I mean, how are you going to identify all of those different groups? And I think there's a real risk of offending somebody because you didn't include Buddhism or something, so I would be guided by what do we need this information for? How is it useful to us in our regulatory work?
Good point. Great point.
The other option, if you want to have, like, I know the original discussion was race and gender, which I think makes a lot of sense in the context, because those are the two broad categories. If you wanted to have some others, maybe you would only do the two main ones in an opt out, sort of, you have to give an answer, even if one is I choose not to answer. And then if you wanted to have a few others that did relate to the regulatory function more directly, then religion you might make those an opt-in entirely. So you don't have to answer them. You don't have to choose one. You can move on without answering them. But there might still be more than the two main categories.
And if I can just follow that up. So on our original survey, we had ethnic identity, Latino and non-Latino. And then we had racial identity, African-American, Black, Asian, Caucasian, white, that was one category, Native, North, Central, or South American, Native, Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander, other minority, and biracial. And and we picked those categories really based on what we were observing in other efforts to identify the different racial composition of populations for different organizations. And then we also included age. And frankly, I think age information is something that is very important to our regulatory function, because we're noticing differences, or I guess there's always questions, are there differences related to age and, compliance with the rules and things like that? And so I think that information could be very useful too. And we did the age categories were under 30, and then we did increments in 10 years up to 90. And then anyone who was over 91 just got a pass on everything.
Couldn't you just do a year of birth or something, just so it would last, it'd be more relevant for years to come?
Sure.
Can I ask a question too, a follow-up question to Alice? When you all had I don't remember this survey, so I'm telling on myself, I'm sure that I either did it and don't remember, or I didn't do it. So I apologize either way. On that survey, when you had biracial, did it allow for you to pick two different races, or it just said biracial?
I don't remember, Dorothy, how exactly it was set up. We can certainly,
Right.
I think we're going to have the ability to address that, but
Okay,
I don't remember.
and I know I'm not trying to go down that road. I just wondered, because I do have some thoughts on that when we do get there.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how we did that optioning, if you could option
Gotcha.
to check 2 or more categories.
I'm sure there, like you said, that was 10 or 11 years ago or something. You would update the information and again, see other people are doing this. The information will be out there.
The other thing we need to remember is if we're talking about anonymous, some of these statistical informations, I'm not sure how they would translate into data. So we wouldn't be able to know based on anonymous input what percentage of which group was subject to discipline, because you wouldn't know who checked which box when they completed that. So as the subcommittee continues to wrestle with the question of whether it will be anonymous or not, I guess more thought about what statistical information is important will have to be considered.
All right, on the notion of trying to get consensus to the extent that we can, do I at least hear consensus forming around a recommendation that we suggest that the bar would collect race, gender, and age information as part of this annual registration process, and that, consistent with our regulatory obligations, consider whether or not other categories set forth on our DEI statement may be relevant to our regulatory obligations? Does that seem to address the issue here?
Yes.
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 All right, then we have consensus around that bullet point, and we shall proceed to the next. Thank you. At the July meeting, you guys obviously, as always, made some great recommendations about what we ought to do in considering these, and thinking about the next bullet point relative to the CLE providers. For example, we had some recommendations about publications, and you rightly suggest that we should punt that to the Publications Committee. With respect to the CLE bullet, should we consider recommending that the CLE committee handle the next bullet point, or not? Not everybody at once. Barbara?
I'm sorry, I was reading it to myself. So
I think this is a little different. So you said the question is whether or not we should punt this over to the CLE committee?
Yes.
I think this is actually different. So this, the way I'm reading it anyway, is if we're someone, our staff or the state bar in general will work with these CLE providers. So the individual providers to develop these robust and engaging CLE.
Yeah, the
And
CLE,
I'm actually in agreement with that.
the CLE committee work with the providers as they do already.
I don't think they, yeah.
Alice?
Go ahead. I'm gonna let Alice talk. She's
I don't mean to interrupt you, Dorothy. I'm sorry. So I used to be the director of the CLE program. And frankly, the way we establish what our priorities are and our policies are by our mandatory requirements. And the providers have always risen to fulfill those. They like the mandatory requirements because it drives business to them.
Correct.
So we have pending before the Supreme Court, of course, this rule amendment that will require 1 hour of DEI training, at least for 2022. But we haven't, the CLE board does not, go to the individual providers and ask them to do anything specific with regard to their programming. It's always been sort of consumer demand that has driven what the providers have done.
Well,
Go ahead.
first of all, the CLA board's very interested in the topic, I think, like you said, Alice, but maybe we just, whether it's a statement from us or something, just to the CLA board, asking them to encourage, I mean, there's two parts to this, the programs and kind of a more diverse lawyer presenter group.
Right. That's right.
And I mean, why couldn't we just somehow say to them, this is something we're interested in, and they pass that word along? I mean, I think there are efforts going on in this, but it'd be nice for them to hear sort of from leadership that it's important.
This list was compiled with information that came before the subcommittee from various jurisdictions and what they were doing and what folks in the subcommittee seemed to at least be interested in discussing. That this particular one, as I recall, relates more to jurisdictions that have within their regulatory function, sort of like the role I serve as trust account compliance counsel. I speak a lot about what we're doing, and I cooperate and work with pretty much whatever CLE provider is seeking to have me speak about it. And I think that's a little bit more of the first part of this. So I'm not sure that we're really equipped as an agency to really fulfill that first bullet point, but I did include it in the list for the subcommittee to discuss.
Alice and Barbara, I know we have, thinking about what was just said, I know we have two amendments that ultimately have to go to the Chief Justice, and they deal with DEI issues in many respects. Having just thought about that, should we table this until we see what happens on those two amendments?
Maybe, I don't know when it went. Well, I mean, there's going to be one of two outcomes, either as with respect to CLE, it's either going to get passed or it's not. So if it did, then we know there's going to be programs developed because it's going to be required. Right. And if it's not, there probably still going to be programs developed because people are interested in it. But there's nothing to stop us from, again, putting out the word somehow to say, we're interested and we encourage you to do it. But it might be worthwhile a way to, at least I believe we might have a little more clarity and soon.
Alice's hand is raised, Todd.
Alice? Yes.
Yeah, so I want to support what Barbara is saying. There's absolutely no reason why your committee cannot encourage both the council and the CLE board to encourage CLE providers to do this voluntarily. What I was trying to point out is, pretty much the way we've pushed policy through is with these mandatory requirements, but there's no reason why we can't do
Okay.
it as a recommendation, and supporting, that we support doing this and make that as a statement. And it doesn't have to come necessarily through the CLE board, but I think maybe a statement to the board and through the council would be appropriate. It would not be inappropriate, I guess, is the way I want to say that.
Okay. So is a suggestion to encourage the CLE committee and CLE providers to do what is set forth in this bullet? Is that what we're suggesting? We will make that recommendation to the issues committee that we recommend to the CLE committee and CLE providers to develop robust and engaging programs, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. All right. Leonor, do we have that? Anything further on that bullet? All right. Thank you. We shall move to the next bullet, which talks about establishing the Juneteenth federal holiday as a paid bar holiday. And I guess one of the things, Alice, maybe Barbara, whomever knows, is there a process that we must follow to get a holiday approved, or do we simply follow whatever is enacted by the legislature? Which is it?
Todd, that has been what we have historically done. We're not subject to the State Personnel Act, but it has worked very well for us to do just have the state holidays be our holidays. The one thing, I would keep in mind is I don't think there's any prohibition on us not doing that. I would want Catherine's office to just double check and make sure there's no other reason that we would need to comply with the state list of holidays. The thing that hits me as executive director is every additional holiday that you add has serious financial
That's right.
meaning for the state bar. And, the General Assembly recognized this, and the governor, when they adopted the Martin Luther King holiday, because they eliminated President's Day. So there have been 12 state holidays since I've been at the state bar, which everybody knows that is now like a really, really long time. There's always been 12 state holidays. And I would suggest to you that if we adopt a new holiday, we may need to think about eliminating another holiday, which would be hard to do. I mean, we do labor, and I have the list of holidays if anybody's interested, or Leonor, if you want to share screen with me, I'll put them up there. If you want to make me a co-host, I can just put that up there so you can see what they are.
I'll do that.
Make sure I can do this. Right.
You are a co-host, and in the meantime, I can also pull them up, and if you don't get them, I'll put them up.
Let me see where I put them.
Well, actually, I better let you take the lead. I don't want to shut my internet down.
Okay. Give me just a minute if you all want to talk while I do this. I had so many things open on my desktop. It's a little hard to find it.
Well, Alice is pulling that up. Other comments regarding this bullet point, views about whether we should pursue this recommendation to the issues committee? Ted?
I'm for it.
Barbara's, Dorothy's for it. Ted, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Juneteenth isn't Juneteenth a federal holiday now?
Yes. I
And
think
so, like, what's the impact of if it's a federal holiday but not a state holiday? That means that the state bar employees still have to go to work that day, right?
I thought it was a state holiday now.
No, it's a federal holiday now, I
Federal.
believe.
Yeah, just federal.
That's why I
Right,
was.
so like Columbus Day is not a state bar holiday, even though it's a federal.
Yep.
Right, and so, I am, in favor of making this a holiday. I think that this is an important day. I guess one of my questions about the 12 holidays is whether or not employees can have sort of 12 floating holidays. Is that, so here's a list, pick 12 kind of thing. Like, for example, obviously people that aren't Christian might not want 3 days for Christmas. So I just throw that out there as an idea.
Others?
I do have a.
Yes, Jennifer, go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. First of all, I want to say, Ted, that was a brilliant idea about the floating holidays. It might complicate things, but great. So just from a practicing in state court attorney's view, sometimes we have questions that come up, and I mean immediate, as we see things very serious and really need the bar's help. That would seem kind of silly that it can't wait 24 hours, but 24 hours might be too late, especially if you're trying to get an ethics issue or an answer on that before something happens. So the way I understand it, and y'all will correct me if I'm incorrect, is that the bar holidays right now reflect when the state courts are actually closed, which is helpful, at least to us practicing in state courts. But and I wish that we could get this holiday approved to the point that the state's courts would be closed, and that they would recognize that and make that a holiday. And then I wouldn't have anything to say about that at all. But the way I understand it is the courts would still be running, or at least the state courts would still be running, and then the state bar would be closed. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
Dorothy's hand is raised, Todd.
Dorothy, go ahead. I can't see that.
It was raised because I was, and I couldn't. Alice, could you tell us what would be the impact? I know you said it would be a financial impact if we were to just.
So every time you add a holiday, you're losing that staff time, and that always has a financial impact. And I was just going to ask that as a part of any final decision about this, that we be really clear about what the financial costs are. I thought Ted's suggestion was a really good suggestion, but I know from the HR end of things, there's an administrative cost to doing that, to having a floating holiday. It really, really complicates things for us. And that means my staff is tied up in managing that aspect and not managing other things. So that has a cost too. So I just would ask that whatever recommendation is made, that at the same time, we're given an opportunity to just present the effects of that for us. So it's a knowing decision when it's made. The other option, as I said, is you could take away one of these holidays. I don't think that'd be very popular, Ted, as much as you say folks may not want one of those Christmas holidays. That's never been my experience so far. So, but I just would ask that we be given an opportunity to really present the actual administrative burden and financial costs.
A good point. Others? And I can't see everybody's hand, so if someone has a comment.
I was just going to ask, when is the district court judges conference every year? Does it not fall on this same week?
Gina, that's a great question. I think you might be right, that may alleviate a lot of concerns. I think it's the third week in June is my memory of the district court conferences. And yeah.
So having been president of the North Carolina District Court Judges Association and on their board for many years, I'm kind of familiar with that. It is generally that third week. It's always the week right after Father's Day, which falls on a Sunday. There was one exception, I think, during the 26 years I did it, and that was because they could only get the hotel on a certain week. But that week is also the same week as the Superior Court Judges Conference. They're later in the week. We usually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they're Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
I think the concept of a floating holiday works better when you have a 24/7 operation, so that it's like a hospital or even retail establishments, so that it doesn't take away from the services offered, even if someone decides to take the day off. I think when you have a situation, as we've been discussing, that literally the state of North Carolina follows a set calendar of holidays, it's very difficult to vary from that, because it does create some very difficult practical problems for people who are working to try to deal with a state agency. We are a state agency that's not working. I think it should be a statewide holiday, but I think it would be very, very difficult for the state bar to act on its own.
Does anyone know where, I thought there was some bill in the legislature dealing with this. Somebody may have indicated it may be in some committee now. Does anyone know the status of anything at the legislature in this regard since the federal holiday was enacted? Gina, did you just?
No, I just wouldn't hold your breath about that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay. Okay.
Todd, if I could also point out, there's a difference between a state holiday and a day off. For example, I think if you look it up, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are state holidays, but you don't get them off. And so I think the designation of a state holiday is different than the designation of a holiday where no one works and everyone is paid.
Paid versus unpaid, perhaps, is what we're saying.
Right.
Right. Okay. Others on this particular point? I'm not sure we're at a consensus here.
No, and while I feel, sometimes it is our role to stand up and be a leader in certain areas, I feel like there'd be a whole lot of resentment from the public that they're just going to view this as the state bar giving itself another holiday on our money. I mean, that's just part of it.
Okay. Others, before we move on to the next bullet point, there's no consensus here that we recommend this that I can detect. Others? All right, then I will take the silence as the lack of a consensus that we make this recommendation to the Issues Committee. Is that fair? Speak up if it's not. All right, we shall proceed.
Can we take a vote?
All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor, and can you do we want to do it by raising hands, or do we want to use the official voting button? Leonore, what's your pleasure? Because I don't know how to do that.
I'm seeing if I can. Oh yeah, it looks like I can create a poll. Let me try that.
All right.
And I did a quick little Google search, and it looks like I see something where we do recognize, North Carolina does recognize Juneteenth, believe leaves it up to the cities and counties to decide
Right.
whether it's paid or
No,
not.
right, it's not a paid holiday, that's right.
Mhm.
I think, as I understand it, Wake County and Raleigh have now decided that it is a paid holiday. I thought that's what I recalled. After
And we
the,
had
after
some
the federal- after the
traction.
federal legislation, I thought I saw that somewhere.
We had some traction in Durham that way, as well as our district court judge
Yeah,
shut down court for that day, so.
fair enough. Are you able to do the poll, Leonore?
Not quickly, no.
I want to do this.
Sorry.
I'm going to ask, I can see everybody here. All those in favor of recommending that we establish Juneteenth as a paid North Carolina state bar holiday, please raise your hand. Okay, I see Jennifer and Ted and Dorothy.
That's what I saw too.
Have I missed anybody? Are all those opposed? Please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I think the vote is that we not recommend, the majority vote is that we not recommend that as a paid state holiday to the Issues Committee. So we shall proceed accordingly with regard to that one.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Are we still considering whether or not it will be a holiday though? For the state bars, we were just addressing whether it would be a paid holiday.
Yeah, our recommendation initially was that we recommend to the Issues Committee that it be a paid holiday for the state bar.
So it won't be a holiday at all for the state bar. Is that what? Am I thinking too hard on this?
Alice, you have any thoughts on that? I mean, can someone decide I want to take a holiday? I guess folks can say I want to take a unpaid leave day, any data.
I mean, because my question is the state, because even though I get very clearly that we decided that it should not be a paid holiday, but I think my question is now, would we still want to recognize it as a holiday though?
I'm not really sure how that would work. I guess it's a suggestion that we would give employees the option to say, I'm taking Juneteenth off as an unpaid day off.
No, I think the at least from my perspective, the suggestion would just be that we would recognize Juneteenth as like we recognize Rosh Hashanah, that it's recognized as a day. Just, it's just not a day, it's a day that we still work, but we're recognizing it as a important day. So it would appear on the calendar as Juneteenth. It just would still be a working day.
I thought I heard somebody say that Juneteenth is already recognized as a holiday in North Carolina, just not a paid one.
Isn't that what the legislation does, Todd? I think that's what the legislation does. And I think Ted's suggestion is perfectly appropriate. I think the state bar can have any type of recognition of the holiday it wants. And I think that would be a good recommendation from this committee, that the date be recognized with some sort of acknowledgement. But I think the distinction is whether or not it's a paid or unpaid holiday. The recognition of a holiday is already established by state law.
You want to make that motion?
I will.
Second.
All right. It's been properly moved and seconded that we recommend to the Issues Committee that Juneteenth be recognized as a holiday, if I heard that correct. Does that correctly state your motion, John? I can't hear him. I can't see him either.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Okay. Okay, properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye,
Aye.
Aye.
and all opposed say nay. I do not hear any opposition. I know a lot of folks are on mute with the microphone, but if anyone has voted contrary to what I said, please speak up. Otherwise, do you have that, Leonore?
I do.
All right. Thank you all for that great discussion. That's a good resolution, I believe, given where we are these days. The next bullet is to ensure that all citizens, including English language learners, have access to the State Bar's public protection programs. Leonor, you want to shed a little bit of light on what we're talking about there?
Yeah, this again was something that another state had done and seemed at least consistent with what this subcommittee's focus would be, and had not been foreclosed as an area we didn't want to touch. And it really just speaks to the idea of access to justice for all, equal access, and the ability to access our forms and information as an agency for the public, particularly for, I would imagine that it would be primarily Spanish speaking English language learners. And I don't know anything about the cost to do it and what it would require. It would be something that we would need to investigate if the subcommittee showed any interest in proceeding with this recommendation.
All right. Comments from the subcommittee. Alice?
Interestingly enough, we just today started our first new public liaison in the ACAP program who is bilingual. So we are making that effort with ACAP. She's new and she's got to learn the whole process of answering inquiries from the public and assisting them. But our anticipation is that she'll also help us in other situations where we need an interpreter to assist us. So in that regard, I guess one of the questions I'm clearly the ACAP program is one of our public protection programs. I don't know what other programs we would be talking about. I think the where we've had a real gap has been in Hispanic language interpreters.
Right.
I don't know that we've seen a lot of other languages where there's been a real issue. Because there's so few and far between where necessary, we could, hire an interpreter. It'd be really hard to do that with regard to the ACAP intake stuff, because that just happens, as it happens, the calls come in and the emails come in. But I think we maybe are addressing it with our largest group of non-English speakers with this person we've just started today.
Catherine Fry has her hand up, Todd.
Catherine? Yes.
Yes, I'd like to know if the grievance committee forms, let me rephrase that, the forms to file a grievance are in Spanish, because if they're not, they absolutely should be. I think that's one of the groups that we see taken advantage of. I've seen that come through sub 3 several times. And I think putting those forms in Spanish is absolutely something that we should do, if they're not already.
Catherine, Catherine Jean, I saw you take yourself off.
Yeah, they are in Spanish. And what we've done when we didn't have a Spanish speaking employee was we have translators and interpreters that we contact as needed to help us with these things. So we do have the forms in Spanish language on the website, and we have not ever had a situation where a person was not able to access our services in the Office of Counsel, any aspect of the Office of Counsel, because of the language barrier.
Okay, great. Others?
Dorothy's hand is up.
I'm sorry, Dorothy, go right ahead.
So I'm assuming the answer to this based on the way, Catherine Jean, you just made that comment. But do we not have, does the State Bar not have access to the interpreters or the interpretation translation line like we have access to with the courts through AOC?
We do not.
Okay.
We do not, but we do actually contract with one of the same people who serves as a translator in court. So she also helps us, but we don't get to do it through AOC. We just do it separately.
Okay. I assume that based on the fact that you said that y'all have some people you contract with, but I was thinking that could be a way to alleviate, because they have interpreters and translators for every language and, quick access to them.
And Dorothy, We
Alice?
budget for this. We budget
Okay.
for paying outside interpreters.
And AOC has not been interested in letting us do that without charge.
I've heard that's no different than how they're not interested in other things. So
Is there a consensus that we make this recommendation to the Issues Committee that's on the table right now? All in favor, please raise your hand so I can see whether or not you're in agreement. All right, that's a majority, so thank you. The next one is to establish a standing committee.
Excuse me, Todd, may I just say one more thing about that?
Absolutely, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Well, I just realized that y'all may not know, but on the website, under the tab for the public, you can translate everything in that whole section of the website into Spanish just by clicking on Espanol. So it's not just the forms, but it's also the explanations of the programs. And all that is also available in Spanish.
That is terrific, thank you. All right, the next bullet point, we're moving on. A standing DEI committee as stated there. What's the committee's thoughts there? Dorothy, I see your hands up.
I kind of see that recommendation and the next recommendation as kind of together, because I would not think that we would need a standing DEI committee if we actually get a DEI staff person or somebody that's designated to handle those things. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that my answer or my position on that would be depending on if we are recommending the staff person and or the designated person for that DEI position.
Okay. Others, and we certainly can discuss these together or separately. Other thoughts on the standing committee? And I guess one question I had, maybe this is Alice or Barbara, what process would we need to go through to establish a standing committee? Standing DEI committee.
So our standing committees are all identified in our rules.
That's right.
So there would need to be a rule amendment process. If you don't mind, Todd, I'll speak to both of these items because
Yes.
I think there's.
I think that's fine. Yes.
I think we need to be really clear with like what the work would be of a committee or of a staff person, particularly with regard to a staff person. That's a salary with benefits and all of that. And is this going to be somebody who's fully occupied doing this? In which case we need to identify all the specific tasks that the person would be responsible for. And is it a full-time position or a part-time position? Would it be something that could be combined with, our other needs that we have in a number of departments? So a person could be in the office council and do this as well, for example. I just feel like if we shouldn't create something without knowing what the purpose is and what the task would be and identifying, what's involved. And I think that's true of committees as well. I've been around the state bar long enough to know if you create a committee, then they're not going to want to sit around and do nothing. They want to have real meaningful things to do. And so, and also the definition in the rule amendment should specify what the task is for that committee and be clear about identifying what the expectations are.
Thank you, Alice. Others? Gina?
Is there a statute of limitations on the work of this committee? I've been on a few subcommittees that seem to go from year to year. So I'm just wondering, how long can we stay doing what we're doing before someone reprimands us for still being together, not being standing, and still, I just don't know the protocol on that.
Barbara, you want to take that one?
I think, the president would reestablish this committee. Would that be correct, Alice? It'd be up to the president or the,
Yeah, we've actually had ad hoc committees and subcommittees that have carried
Sometimes
on
that have-
from
yeah.
one president's administration to the next.
they wouldn't have to, but they might could. That would be sort of my recommendation, was let this one continue for a bit and then see, you know, it's going to pass. It's going to continue. The work won't be done this bar year, I don't think. You're going to make these recommendations.
That's right.
I'm just not sure you need, as Alice said, that we have enough clarity to know that we need a standing committee. And I just want to be careful, even though I hate saying this all the time, it's true. You know, we can't bleed over too much into advocacy. Clearly, some of these court rulings have said that DEI initiatives are part of the regulatory mission, but there is a line there somewhere. And yeah, I guess I'd say I don't think we need to do that yet.
Others? Dorothy?
So just kind of going back, since we're still talking about these together, as far as the DEI staff person, I agree with Alice that I don't think that we need a long-term standing committee. And I said that initially, that if we have a staff person, then that person would be the one kind of being the diversity officer at the state bar and making sure that if we have a plan and all of that, that if we were to create that, and we wanted to make sure that that plan was being, that the goals of the plan are being met. And the diversity officer would be the person to make sure that they, as the way they put it in DEI, connect the dots between diversity, equity, inclusion, and all those things within the organization. So kind of holds the organization accountable. Because I don't want us to, if we do go down this road and we have a statement and then a plan, you want members and folks want to see that these goals are actually being met, that you're creating the goals and that they're being met. And that it's not just some statement that's just being made and it's just put out there. And so that's what I would offer as far as the actual staff person. Now, as to all those other things, yes, I certainly agree that we have to think about, would it be a full-time person, part-time? What could it be coupled with some other things and all of that? But I'm a strong advocate that you have someone, with whatever way it is, be designated as the person that's going to make sure that the organization that is in compliance with whatever the diversity statement is in the plan, if that is what ends up happening moving forward. Because I just don't want it to be we just put it out there just to appease, what looks to be that we're just appeasing folks by saying we have this statement, this is what we're about, but then there's no accountability or no way for anyone to know whether or not we actually are doing what we said and that we're about what that statement actually says.
Could we, this has stretched over a few meetings, and maybe when we look at this after we finish today, maybe Alice and her staff could kind of look at it and see, based on what we've said, if it passed, what that person would be doing, and kind of come up with a proposal. So
I think that would be good.
She could assign a few of these things to somebody.
Other comments? I can't tell if anyone else has a hand up. Yes, John.
I agree with what's been said. It seems to me that when you combine these two bullet points, we're really still talking about a work in progress. And as far as a recommendation goes to the Issues Committee, that seems to me a little bit of it's not an artificial deadline, but it's a deadline coming up that we're not really ready to make specific recommendations for. And so I think this would be an ongoing topic for this committee or some future committee to continue to discuss, both with respect to the existence of the committee and with respect to what type of staff position should be created and how that would look.
Thanks. Anyone else? I too see this as in some respects a continuous process. I mean, in my view, we are making recommendations to the Issues Committee. My thought was that once we make those recommendations, it would then be incumbent upon the Issues Committee to determine whether or not, for example, they would convene another subcommittee or allow this subcommittee to continue to study these issues. But I'm in full agreement with what Dorothy has said and what others have said, is that we can't simply, in my view, put out a diversity statement and declare victory. I do think that D&I is a journey. It's not a sprint. It is something that is going to require continuous attention. And whether that is hiring a staff person or constituting some committee, standing committee going forward, is in some respects the details. But I think in terms of the recommendations, this committee needs to decide whether or not we're going to make a recommendation of some sort to the Issues Committee before we conclude our work. And I think in some respects, what a smart person once said, what gets measured gets done. And I think we need to have some way to measure whether or not we are living up to the DEI statement and all the other efforts that we're going to push forward on if we make these recommendations to the Issues Committee, and then the Issues Committee allows us to continue doing our work whereby we end up implementing and developing and executing on some grand plan in the D&I space. And so I'm not, and this is just me speaking, I'm not too troubled about making certain recommendations, because I do believe that there still has to be a lot of refinement to whatever recommendations that we make, that the recommendations that we make are not the gospel and they're not written in stone. They're simply recommendations that can be refined or tweaked or even rejected going forward. So I want us to be mindful of what we're recommending is not going to necessarily be the end all. It is going to be our recommendation that the Issues Committee continues to address these issues. That's sort of how I have seen this unfolding.
Todd, I'm thinking that based on everything I'm hearing, the subcommittee, what the recommendation actually is different than the way it's phrased. And so I think I think it just needs to be phrased differently. I'm hearing that there's some support for the idea, but we're far too premature in the process. And so I'll revise that recommendation and send out, it's really a recommendation that the subcommittee or some functional equivalent of it continue to study, to continue to exist, to study, among other things, this staff person issue.
That is precisely how I see it, quite frankly, listening to you. So thank you for articulating that. And with the permission of the subcommittee, maybe we can sort of revise those two bullets to sort of say something along the lines of continue to study the establishment of, something like that, as to each one of these bullets. And that will address what I've sort of heard, and I think what Leonore just said. Is that something that we can sort of take back and sort of rephrase and revise these bullets and then bring it back to the subcommittee for further review and study and discussion? Does that work?
Yes, for me.
Yes.
Any objections to that? I'm trying to just reach consensus here and make sure we're on the right path. So I think we are. So great. It is 3:04, and we have one more bullet. Does anyone have 5 minutes to discuss this next bullet, or should we reconvene? Somebody speak up. Barbara?
Going.
How many people are we missing at this meeting, Todd?
Leonore, we're not missing very many, are we?
Give me 1 second and I'll let you know.
It just seemed like a smaller group than we had in July, but
we're missing really, in terms of those who've ever attended, we're missing max 2. We have
Okay.
one member who's not attended any of the meetings, so we're pretty well.
Yeah.
And we don't have all the officers, obviously.
Yeah, with your permission, Barbara, and with the subcommittee's permission, why don't we, and to be respectful of time, why don't we adjourn for now and take back and revise the bullets based on the discussions we've had today, and then with the idea that we may have to, obviously, my objective, although an ambitious one, and probably an unrealistic one, was to try to have our recommendations to the Issues Committee at the October meeting. We may not be there yet, or we may be able to. We may be able to meet in October and finalize our work then, because it looks like we would have every bullet covered so far, other than the last bullet, which is to look at the history of the state bar.
Yeah, I'm fine if we talk about that one right now. I mean, we can see how long if you can tell pretty quick whether it's going to be a long discussion.
All right, why don't you lead us off with your views, if you don't mind, Madam President?
No, I didn't plan to do that. I didn't know if Alice was still on here and maybe would just say a little bit about what the Bar Association did, because I think that's part of what led to this, but I don't know if she's on.
Alice is on
Yeah,
there.
I'm here, and I think that Leonore picked this up from me. The Bar Association, and really it was Jason Hensley who got interested in this. He went back and started looking at the admissions to the Bar Association and the exclusion of Black lawyers for years and years and years. And what he found was a pretty ugly history. And he actually went back to the original documents, and I think he did a great deal of the work and pulled it together. And then the Board of Governors endorsed it and went very public with it, very candid in accepting that this was their history and that they had an obligation to do something to change it and to recognize and apologize for it. And so I got interested in that question, like, well, what's it been like with the state bar? And actually Peter, who is really an original documents guy, he loves going back and reading our old newsletters and whatnot. And he found some stuff that interestingly enough, it was actually about integration of the public schools. And there was actually a forum for the State Bar Council where they were talking about that. But I think it's well worth it for us to go back and research and look at what the State Bar has done, and to own our own history about this. And maybe that will also provide us all with some insight with, why we are the organization we are today, or how we might be a better organization. So I think this is well worth it. My thinking was that this might be something where we would actually hire sort of a historian type person to do this. I can tell you right now, none of my staff lawyers have time to work on something of this nature, despite Peter's real interest in it. But that is something I think that we ought to have a better understanding and really our understanding of our interaction with the Bar Association during those years as well, because there's always been this intimate relationship between the two organizations.
I saw those newsletters and it was absolutely fascinating. I mean, I just saw a glimpse of a little bit of it, but I think in a sense you're right, Alice, and it kind of provides context for the work of this subcommittee, because sometimes the answer to people who say, why is this important? Why is this necessary? Why do you think it's necessary? Is partly by recognizing our history, not dwelling there, not trying to fix it. You can't do that, but acknowledging it.
That's right. I thought I saw John, saw your hand. Yes.
I don't recall, it might have been 2016, 2017, but the North Carolina Bar Association, maybe some of you were there, at its annual meeting, recognized the 50th anniversary of Americans belonging to the North Carolina Bar Association. and they devoted a full afternoon program. And they had Chief Justice Fry was interviewed by his granddaughter Whitney, and Chief Judge Gregory from the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals came and spoke. And I'm pretty sure it was while Clarence Davis was president of the Bar Association. I think that afternoon programming is really instructive and consistent with what Alice has just said. I would love for the Bar Council to have the opportunity to view that afternoon program, because it really goes into the experience that Chief Justice Fry and Julius Chambers had, and a couple others in their efforts to join the North Carolina Bar Association. I think that's what Barbara was referring to when she talked about the minutes of the Bar Association. And I really think it's something everybody should see. It's a wonderful program, and I imagine the Bar Association would have that. And I think it's something that everyone should have an opportunity to view.
Does everyone have at least a copy of that NC Bar Association report that came out recently? Has everyone seen it? If not, we can ask Leonore to.
I think we sent it at the beginning,
I thought so
at the first
too.
meeting. And you've got two hands raised.
Okay, I see Judge Rader
and Dorothy.
Judge Rader, go ahead, and then we'll go.
I read the Bar Association publication that was sent out earlier, I guess when we first started. It was a really interesting read. I mean, I think it was well done and worth it. But I kind of view this bullet as a no-brainer. I think this is something we definitely need to do. And I would rather us do this work and put it out there than to have someone else do it and then be attacked for our history or something, if that's the case. But now I really think this is something that would be important, not only to the Bar Council, but all our members and the public.
Thank you. Did someone else have their hand up? Dorothy, yes.
I totally agree. I think it's a no-brainer as well. I think I would encourage that when we are looking for folks to do this work, this history work, that they would include Mickey Mashaw, Eric Mashaw. Those were two specific attorneys that were named in that report as trying to become members of the Bar Association. And Mickey Mashaw has recently retired, and I know he would not necessarily love the work necessarily, but he would appreciate being included to, participate in that work. I'm very hopeful because like I always make sure I remind everyone that a lot of our members, minority members, have a very negative viewpoint of the state bar. And so I'm very hopeful that this, research and this, digging deep into history would bring forth some things, some very positive things that the state bar has done to, combat systemic racism and it would dispel some of the notions and some the thoughts and feelings that a lot of minority members have. And so that's what my hope is with it, not to research all of this and stay there and just, open up really negative, bad wounds that people have about these things, but to show that this happened. We've moved from it, and these are the things that we're trying to do to make it even more positive moving forward.
Yeah, I guess I would just add to that is that in addition, I certainly agree with Dorothy and hope that there's positive things to come out. But if there are negative things, that I think it's important for us to acknowledge and apologize for those negative things. One of the things that I thought was really important and made me proud to be a leader in the Bar Association is that the Bar Association, affirmatively apologized and for the discrimination that has occurred against Black attorneys. Those things don't erase the bad things that happen, but it does show an acknowledgement of the hurt that those things cause. And so, that's one thing that I hope the State Bar Council will decide to do if we move forward with this history, is that if we find that the State Bar contributed to discrimination against Black lawyers or any other group of lawyers, that the Bar Council will decide to issue a formal apology for its role in that.
Others?
Todd, I just wanted to let the subcommittee know, and Ted knows this, the Bar Association continues its work in terms of how it's going to continue its research and continue to tell a story. And the Mashaw brothers will be a central part of that work. We're grateful for the time that they're lending to it. And also to Alice's point about historian, one of the things that Arizona did, and I think I expressed this to the subcommittee previously, is they partnered with a research institution, and that I suppose helped defray the cost of paying a historian, because when you partner with the academic, whoever the academic is in the research, I guess their credit comes in the contribution they've given to the work by way of research, writing, and investigation, and all that goes with that. So that's something else we might possibly consider.
Terrific. Others? I have nothing to add. You guys have said it all. That's I think I heard the word no-brainer several times. So I'm glad we didn't. I'm glad you guys didn't listen to me and let me adjourn the meeting, because that was easy. All right. I think I hear consensus that we definitely make this recommendation to the Issues Committee. So I will take it as such unless there is a overwhelming uproar against that. So if that concludes our exploration of the bullet points that we recommended, and with that, we indeed may be able to make some recommendations in October if we can get our bullets together. There's nothing else for us to discuss or debate on this list of recommendations. If there are others that you guys believe we should consider, please do so. But it seems to me that we've done some really good work, and I thank you for that. And what we will try to do is to put together a list of recommendations as we believe we have heard them, and then subject to Leonore and Carmen telling me otherwise, we'll recirculate those and see if we can get consensus around those before October. And then maybe we can make a recommendation to the Issues Committee at the October meeting, if we've concluded our work in terms of making the recommendation from the subcommittee. Does that seem like a workable approach? Barbara, Alice, others?
Does to me.
All right. That's all I had. Any other matters for the good of the order? All right, hearing none, we shall adjourn, and we will be